Hello, everyone. It is 5 o'clock here in Japan, so let's get started. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Niklas Karonen. I am the Community Director at Nordic Innovation House Tokyo. And today we will be talking about health tech and COVID-19 in Japan, hear about some of the industry insights and recent developments in this field. I'm going to give it a few more seconds for people to tune in and get settled. And while doing so, let me introduce you the technology that we're using today. So this is a Zoom webinar, which means that as attendees, your microphones and videos will be muted throughout this session. However, if you wish to interact with our panelists during the panel discussion, please use the Q&A button that you can find from the toolbar. And we'll be incorporating some of your questions in the panel discussion. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. The agenda for today, I will first give a brief introduction to Nordic Innovation House and Nordic Innovation House Tokyo. Then we will enjoy 2 keynote speakers. And then after that, we will move on to the panel discussion. And without further ado, I would like to get started with the Nordic Innovation House presentation. We are also recording today's session, so we will send you over the recording along with some other additional information and a feedback form after the event. And thank you again for tuning in, and let's get started. Nordic Innovation House is a unique collaboration between the 5 Nordic countries, being Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, and Denmark, and also Nordic Innovation headquartered in Oslo. We focus on assisting startups and growth companies with market entry and expansion, and we are funded by Nordic Innovation and the Nordic Council of Ministers. Besides bringing startups and growth companies, we're also looking forward to bringing Nordic entrepreneurship and values and ways of doing business into these global hotspots. We're currently located in Silicon Valley, New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, and now the latest chapter here in Tokyo. And why Tokyo? Why Japan? Well, as you know, Japan is the world's 3rd largest economy and consumer market with a fast-growing startup ecosystem. Actually, just last week, Tokyo was ranked as number 15 on the Global Startup Ecosystems 2020 report by Startup Genome, which is really, really exciting news for us. And some of the areas where we see Japan calling for innovation include decreasing population and labor force, aging population, increasing medical and nursing costs, some of similar challenges that we're facing in the north as well, energy, environmental challenges, and also open innovation as a broader topic is very heavily on the Japan government's agenda, and encouraging larger corporations to work together with startups, also recently with tax benefits. And we inaugurated our operations here in Tokyo just last month in the middle of this COVID-19 situation, which means that we're currently fully virtual. Hence the webinar. You are actually joining our very first public event. So thank you for being here for this special day for us. And some of the initial focus areas that we have been looking into here in Tokyo include ICT, IoT, entertainment, health, such as today, machinery, advanced manufacturing, green technology and sustainable solutions, and then food, beverage, especially from the food tech sector point of view. And please give us a follow on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook to stay up to date with what we're doing. We look forward to welcoming you into our physical location as well, and also sending invitations to our future events, and eventually also information about our membership offering. And we have some further contact details at the very end of this webinar, and we'll also be sending you information through the email address that you used to register. So you have plenty of ways to reach out to us, whether you're a Nordic company or perhaps an ecosystem player here in Japan interested in getting involved with the Nordic Innovation House. But let's get to the main part of today. So here is a brief agenda of what you can expect from now. We will have 2 keynotes of about 20 minutes. And after that, we'll jump into the expert panel discussion with Q&A, and then we will have short closing words. But without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Mr. Takuma Inamura from Ministry of Economy, Trade and Invest, METI, here in Japan, Director at Healthcare Industries Division, who will give us a keynote titled Healthcare Innovation Policy in Japan. So Inamura-san, if you can please share us your video and put your mic on, and I have your deck, so I will be pressing forward for you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Okay, let me start introducing myself. As Nicholas-san introduced, my name is Takuma Inamura, Director at METI's Healthcare Industry Division. And I have been working for Japanese government for 22 years and worked for many different policy areas, including energy policy, international trade policy, industrial policy, and I assumed the current position of Healthcare Industry Division 3 weeks ago. So I'm quite new to this area, and I'm a bit feel uneasy for making presentation at this honorable situation for this Nordic Innovation House with my limited knowledge on this topic, which I'm going to present. But let me do my best. Today, I will make a short presentation on healthcare innovation policy in Japan. Let's move to the next slide, please. So today's presentation includes 3 points. First is Japan's situation, super aging society. And second part, I will explain Japanese government's effort for improving business environment. And in the third part, our effort for supporting healthcare startups. Please go to the next slide. First part is Japan's situation. As you all know, Japan is in super aging society. As this chart clearly shows, in this chart, Japan's ratio of the elderly is very high, showing in the red line. It's currently around 27% of the population and going up to near 40% in 2050, and which is among the highest in the world. So putting this as a backdrop of the Japan's our policy, please go to the next slide. This high share of the elderly causes structural problem in Japanese social security system. The pictogram below show that working population supports elderly over 65 years old. And in 2017, the ratio to one elderly working people, there are 2.1 working people. But as a aging, in 2040, 1.5 working people have to support one elderly. And then in 2065, 1.3 working people have to support one elderly. Please go to next slide. This demographic structure leads to a very severe social security financial situation in Japan. Two pie chart in the left shows a rapid increase of social security cost in Japan. In 1990, 47 trillion yen was the budget for social security cost, and currently it exceeded 120 trillion yen twice in 27 years. So it is growing fast. And right chart show how the government debt is big in Japan. The total government debt in Japan is roughly around beyond 200% of GDP, which is the highest among OECD countries. And as you see, countries has a very sound government financial situation. We are very envious of that. And so with this national financial situation in Japan, we cannot heavily rely on the public healthcare insurance system. And we believe it is quite important to develop healthcare business outside the public insurance system. Next slide, please. In this picture, I'd like to explain what we are trying to do. And our target is to grow market of healthcare industry outside public healthcare insurance system. The circle in the center shows the size of public health and nursing care insurance, which is planned and regulated by Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare. So outside this planned economy, there are a lot of healthcare industry, ranges from healthy food, sports club and gym to private insurance. And according to our estimate, please see the figure at the bottom right. This healthcare, the market size of healthcare industries grows rapidly. It was 25 trillion yen in 2060 and estimated to grow to 33 trillion yen in 2025. So we believe private sector can play an important role in increasing quality of life for patients and elderly and enabling a sustainable public health insurance system. Next slide, please. Then what will be the government role? And first, we think it's important for government to improve healthcare business environment. There are several ways to improve business environment. As shown here, number one, promoting digital health. Number two, incentivizing insurer for health enhancement activities. And three, updating regulation on medical software. Number four, promoting online healthcare under COVID-19. And today, I'll provide a bit detailed information on the first part, promoting digital health. Next slide, please. So this is our rough idea on digital health. The aim of promoting digital health is to for efficient and effective healthcare system. As you all know, there are rising importance of utilizing healthcare data. And our principle is to promoting innovation by stimulating private investment in digital health. There are several ways, as shown below in this slide. One is to balancing utilization and protection of digital healthcare data, and also to pass on the benefit of innovation to data holder, including doctors or citizens. And also, it is quite important to demonstrate the effect of behavioral change in chronic disease prevention. The last part, I will provide a bit, one example in the next slide. Next, okay. This is one result of our demonstration project funded by METI. So in 2016, METI started a large-scale demonstration project, which includes 1,000 subjects with the collaboration of 8 company groups. Total employee is more than 1 million. So we have a large group of subjects, and these 1,000 subjects include people who have pre-diabetes and also mild diabetes symptom. As you see, the diagnostic standard for diabetes is HbA1c. So pre-diabetes means around that level, around 5.6%, and mild diabetes level means around 6.5%. The subjects received advice from a smartphone app that monitors their steps, weight, and blood pressure. And these apps send cheering up message to the subject, and also sometimes send alerts. So using this smartphone apps, we try to influence the subjects and to change their behavior in the way to prevent diabetes. And the rough result is shown in the chart below. So the vertical axis shows the level of this diagnostic standard of HbA1c. At the beginning, it was for the group who are provided the smartphone, they has on average the percentage of 6.99. And after 3 months of using this app, the level has decreased to 6.43. So this is one example how with demonstration of the effect of behavioral change in preventing diabetes by utilizing this kind of personal health record. Please go to the next slide. Another example we are currently doing is promoting online consultation and diagnosis under the COVID-19. As you know, online diagnosis is strictly regulated currently, but there's some special decision has made to deregulate this kind of diagnostics. So we are now, the Japanese government is providing some subsidy, and also deregulation measure is done recently. So this kind of policy decision is quite important to improve the healthcare business environment. Next slide, please. In this part, I will explain our effort to support healthcare startups. There are 3 examples. One, Japan Healthcare Business Contest, which we started in 2016. And second, we created Healthcare Innovation Hub. And third, we host international conference named Well Aging Society Summit. Next slide, please. This shows the amount and number of funding for startups in each sector, and the vertical axis, vertical axis show the amount of funding, and the horizontal axis show the number of startups. And as you clearly see, healthcare is one of the most promising area for startups in Japan. Which has received one of the highest funding in 2018, and the number of the startup was largest, and which is more than artificial in such area as artificial intelligence or IoT. So to support these healthcare startups, please go to the next slide. One example is our government METI support business contest focusing on healthcare startups. We call it Japan Healthcare Business Contest, in abbreviation JHEC. So this photo is that of this year. We hosted this JHEC in January in Tokyo. And so in the next slide, I will show some example of the past award winner of this business contest. In 2019, a company named Kakehashi won the Grand Prix. And this company is focusing on medication instruction support tool for pharmacists. And so this is one area. And next slide, please. And another example is MediVR, which won Grand Prix in 2018. The company provides an instrument and software for rehabilitation system using virtual reality and artificial intelligence. This is one area. And please go to the next slide. And a company named TripleW won the Grand Prix in 2017. This is, I think, quite unique. This company provides a product for urination timing predicting devices, which detects the change in bladder size and predict urination timing, and which is important for supporting people who have difficulty in urination by themselves in care home. So as you see, there are quite different subsector in healthcare startup in Japan, and we like to keep supporting these kind of new startup in Japan. Please go to the next slide. We will also have this JHEC event in 2021 next year, and we will start the application process this year from July, and the process go on to the next year, and we will make final judge in January next year. And so far, this event is I would say application will be done in Japanese, and also the presentation is done in Japanese. So it might be a little bit difficult for a foreigner to participate. But and at this stage, I haven't heard that any foreign company has won Grand Prix. But I think it's good that this kind of event is open, and as far as someone can write in Japanese or speak Japanese. So I hope in the future some foreign company can, foreign startup can apply for this JHEC. And then please go to the next slide. Another effort is to have healthcare innovation hub. This slide is a little bit busy. But let me explain. This is hello. Can I go on? Okay. Okay. So we funded healthcare innovation hub, which is very small, which is in physically very small office with 3 or 4 staff, but it has very wide virtual existence, and so the clients, including startup or business or investor or academia, they can request online for networking or consultation, and we retain advisors, 15 advisors who expert on this area, who might be investor or academia or IT startup. So this kind of advisor can connect on the request of the client to many different rated company or person. So this is what we call innovation hub is kind of a nexus for connecting client requests to the expert in this area. And we'd like to support this kind of close networking, and which will be important for accelerating this kind of activity by healthcare startups. So we started this in June 2019, just 1 year ago, and the hub has supported so far more than 170 clients, which includes 20 foreign clients. So you can contact this healthcare innovation hub in English. So I hope the more and more foreign investor or startup can touch this network of healthcare innovation hub. Please move to the next slide. A third example, we host international conference named Well Aging Society Summit. And this picture shows the event, second World Aging Society Summit, October last year. And as you see in the bottom, there are many figures from many countries, especially from Finland. Health Minister has joined, so we are very happy. The number of participants is 641, and the participating country and region was 22. So we'd like to keep this event to be the hub of international discussion on this topic. Next slide, please. This is an example of figure who made a keynote speech while Aging Society. Next slide, please. So as you see, the national flag, many countries, and also organizations like World Economic Forum or National Academy of Medicine, United States, has participated at this event. Next slide, please. This year, we are going to host the third event in this October in Tokyo. And the focus topic will be Aging Society, Digital Health, Innovation, and Healthcare. And this will be two-day events, including keynote, panel discussion, networking, and so on. And at this stage, we haven't finally decided to hold this as a face-to-face meeting or online. We'd like to have a face-to-face gathering, but we have to carefully watch how the situation goes under the COVID-19. So we will keep updating you if we decided how to, when we decided the format of this event. Next slide, please. Every year, this World Aging Society Summit is held in connection with other major events on this area. So we call Healthcare Innovation Weeks in October. As you see in green, green arrow, we will have BioJapan, which is a very big event on biotechnology in Japan. And also there are some related events at these 2 weeks. So we think this kind of event have synergy effect to have many participants and for our World Aging Society Summit in Tokyo. Next slide, please. So this is a short presentation on what our Japan's current situation and what Japanese government doing, and also especially on to support startup. But as I explained, I just started my career as director of healthcare industry 3 weeks ago. So I'd like to learn much from today's event by having many questions or making discussion with you all. And also, I think it's quite important for Japanese government to invite many foreign investors and startups to Japan. Because we have many things to learn from other countries in how the other government is making healthcare policy or what kind of new technology is envisaged in other countries. So we'd like to keep our discussion open with foreign friends. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inamura-san, for your presentation. Very impressive numbers. The funding going to the healthcare startups and also 33.1 trillion yen by 2025. So looking forward to seeing that realizing. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce our second keynote speaker for today, Mr. Patrick Branch, who is a partner at L.E.K Consulting here in Tokyo. And his keynote is titled as Entry Considerations for Health Technology Companies Assessing the Japan Market. Therefore, please, Patrick, if you can share your screen. Thank you so much.
Yep. Can you see the screen and hear me, Nicholas?
Looks great. Sounds well.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the introduction. So I think we've got about 20 minutes here. So what I wanted to do with my allocated time was from the perspective of somebody that helps companies enter Japan and kind of scale up and ideally succeed in Japan. Share some of my perspectives around, first of all, why should Japan be on your radar in the first place? What is it about Japan that makes a compelling kind of opportunity? Kind of second, I think some of the points around the opportunity are kind of obvious, but there's the challenges and the nuances which people get unstuck on. So I want to share some of my perspectives there. In general, what are some of the difficult things that people, not necessarily detracting from the opportunity, but are best to be aware of in general, and then how do they apply across different segments in the healthcare sector. And then finally, speak to some of the kind of the emerging trends from COVID-19, and I'm not sure opportunity is the appropriate word to use, but how what needs or does that kind of accelerate, or trends does COVID-19 accelerate, and how can healthcare companies help address those needs and address the broader needs of society. So that's what I have for you. Just a couple of points just to introduce myself. So I'm a partner with L.E.K Consulting in Tokyo. You can probably look up L.E.K on the internet, but we're a strategy consultancy firm with a deep expertise in healthcare. We've got a big presence in APAC as well as more globally, and a big office here in Tokyo focused on healthcare. My background is purely in healthcare. I've spent a long time with L.E.K, but also worked with AstraZeneca and Biogen in the region as well. Just a little bit about our office here. So we work a lot with a number of different types of companies, ranging from established kind of local companies, established big pharmas, established big medtech companies, but also a lot with innovators in the healthcare segment. So ranging from biopharma all the way to kind of healthcare IT, and kind of helping those types of innovators think about Japan, what it takes to succeed, and then kind of more tactically how to go about entry as well. So first of all, about the case for Japan. So I've spent about half my career here, and have helped probably, 30, 50 companies kind of think about Japan and how to enter. And there are some very compelling characteristics about the market, which, if you were to look across the world and say, what are your 5 must-have international markets, I think Japan would nearly always be on that list, and hopefully in the middle to close to top. And the reason being, there's some fairly self-explanatory things on the macro side of the equation in terms of the size of the marketplace, population-wide, demographics, disease profile, and then also kind of just the economic heft of Japan. It's a wealthy market with the ability and willingness to pay for innovative healthcare. Kind of more specifically about the healthcare system itself, there are several what I consider attractive kind of characteristics. Some of them are kind of, they're not necessarily conducive to a efficient healthcare system per se, but they create opportunities for companies which have solutions that address some of the challenges. But beginning with the overall philosophy of the healthcare system in Japan, fundamentally, and this has kind of been proven pretty consistently over the years, it's a market which is essentially committed to offering the world's best healthcare equitably to all Japanese citizens. And that's a pretty strong promise, and it does continue to do so. And I think if I just think to a recent gene therapy example, where a gene therapy for a disease called SMA was approved and priced and now made available in Japan at a very compelling price, that meant that the manufacturer was compelled to bring it to market, and Japanese patients could benefit. I think another gesture of and signal of Japan's commitment. But looking at the system itself, infrastructure-wise, highly developed, the regulatory system, I think people from afar think that Japan is going to have a scary and cumbersome and bureaucratic and kind of challenging regulatory system. But in practice, it's streamlined. You see, at least on the biopharma side, products getting approved and similar timelines to what we see in the US and EU, if not even quicker. And there is within the regulator a desire to bring innovation to market. If we think about the reimbursement system, insurance is broad, it's deep, it's equitable, and there's willingness to pay. And as we think about kind of more healthcare IT side of things, I mean, I'll have more here to say on the challenges, but there is a lot of data, but there will be qualifications there that I'll explore in a second. And then just thinking about the business of healthcare in Japan, it's a big market. Even though it's big, and we'll speak a bit about competition in a second, there are a lot of opportunities for innovators from outside of Japan to come into Japan and deliver something which isn't, offered in Japan by local players, and there is an underserved part of the market. And then thinking about partnerships, I mean, there's an ecosystem of collaborators that can help you succeed in Japan. Next, challenges. So yes, Japan may be attractive, but not necessarily a simple or easy market to address. So I'll speak to some of these challenges, and this is in some ways a moving target, given kind of Japan's demographic profile and some of the financial pressures that's creating. So just beginning on the right-hand side over here around the macro landscape, I think, these challenges, but, basically it's an aging population, actually a shrinking population, although that population aged over 65 proportionally is increasing, but isn't definitely not declining. Disease profile, there are some nuances here on epidemiology that need to be considered. And then from an economic perspective, at the macro level, with the aging of the population, you have a shrinking tax base, you've got slow growth that puts pressure on healthcare financing, also puts pressure on individuals' ability to pay out pockets and so on and so forth. That creates increased kind of pressure in the system. If I go over to the left-hand side here, some more specifics about the challenges, tied to actual kind of characteristics of the healthcare system. If I begin at the highest, kind of more philosophic level, priority-wise, yes, the market is committed to innovation, but to do so, it's increasingly trying to do less or more with less, rather, and not necessarily set up today to do that in such a smart way, although hopefully that will change. If we think about the system's infrastructure and kind of design of core components, the delivery system is very fragmented, lots of hospitals, lots of clinics, not much in the way of kind of sites of care beyond kind of traditional hospitals and clinic-based care, which, creates a need to address a lot of core points, but also means that opportunities tied to things like home health are limited. Regulatory-wise, there are areas of stringent kind of requirements on certain topics, so healthcare data, if you're in the world of cell therapy around genetically modified material. The reimbursement system, while generous, is still largely oriented towards rewarding volume rather than value. And, so much of healthcare innovation outside of Japan today is focused on creating economic value and speaking to incentives in the system. If the system itself isn't set up to acknowledge that, it can be tough to put together a compelling value proposition. Data-wise, yes, there is data, but it's quite scattered and difficult to access. And to the extent you can bring data together, given the reimbursement landscape, it's also a little bit difficult to come up with compelling use cases for that data. where there are incentives aligned, which would get people to kind of pursue solutions kind of being driven by data. Around the market ecosystem at the bottom, competition-wise, there are, in certain subsegments of the marketplace, big players, challenging players. The supply chain, so getting your product to market and to customers, can be very challenging in the world of medical technologies, where you may have to work with a very complex patchwork of dealers and distributors. Partners can be difficult to work with. And then human resource-wise, a lot of the companies we work with really struggle for managerial talent, and then also talent, with kind of very specific skill sets. For example, with CRAs in the world of CROs, in the world of biopharma, kind of folks who are specialized in regulatory affairs or pharmacovigilance and so on. And even more difficult if you're looking for English speakers also with those specialized skills. So a market which is attractive, but not without its challenges. In terms of specific subsegments of the marketplace, what I've tried to do here is lay out some of the nuanced challenges that are, relevant to different players in the healthcare marketplace. Healthcare, I wasn't quite sure the scope of healthcare technology, given it could apply in many ways. So I decided to try and capture it all on this slide, and the challenges that exist. So let me just go through some of them on this page. So if you think about biopharma at the top here, kind of a persistent challenges around pricing. When you find out your pricing for your drug is often after you've made a decision to invest. Reimbursement doesn't award necessarily economic value propositions. The market is nuanced in terms of clinical practice. The call point, so who you're selling to, can be quite diffuse and costly to serve. In the world of regenerative medicine, so this is kind of this second category here. So here I'm thinking cell therapy, gene therapy, and that type of thing, where cells have been modified, often ex vivo, and put back into a patient's body. This is well, first of all, it's not in here, but this is an area with great regulatory, setup in terms of being very streamlined. But there are challenges here that companies need to manage. One is around for genetically modified material, kind of the interpretation of Cartagena, the Cartagena Act, and the requirements to have kind of biosafe manufacturing and distribution are quite stringent, and getting sign-off from the regulator can be quite time-consuming. On the right-hand side here, just a couple of other things. I think the pricing system for advanced cellular therapies, which are potentially curative, isn't really set up right now to properly reward that in a kind of a sustainable way that make sure that companies do get rewarded for their innovation, and also is set up to ensure sustainability of the healthcare system. So I would imagine there will be change there coming at some point in the future. And then the final point there is just that when you come to kind of transformative therapies, there's a lot that needs to be done to rework supply chains, and then also kind of patient journeys. Next point's about healthcare IT. I've kind of mentioned some of these, but there's a lot of fragmentation in the healthcare system in terms of where data is. There's a lot of somewhat challenging regulations around the use of data, and who can use data, and what it can be used for. When you think about in the hospital, electronic health records, electronic medical records, they aren't the same platforms that are used in the US and Europe. They tend not to be well integrated, so you don't see data sharing across sites of care. And then there's always challenges with, if you have a solution which sits on an EHR, probably need to be repurposed. And I guess just the final point here is, I believe in the US and potentially in the EU, there is a regulatory pathway for healthcare IT interventions. I don't think that's defined yet in Japan. If you have a healthcare IT offering, which promises clinically demonstrable improvements in a certain disease state, which can be demonstrated through trials. There isn't a pathway that you can get that approved as an intervention and make claims around it. On the medical device side, you can see the challenges here. I'll pick out a couple. One is really this dealer landscape, which can prove to be quite challenging. How do you maximize your opportunity for your product, partner with the right distributors to do that? Another challenge is just around sites of care. As I mentioned, sites of care that are well established outside of Japan, home care, ambulatory, surgical centers, that type of thing, are not well developed here. Around diagnostics, one of the big challenges here and the more innovative side of things around next generation sequencing is tests that require, NGS platforms. There isn't really a big installed base of NGS right now, and the clinical community is still a bit suspect of basically genomic testing, which means there's the ramp there to take off for that marketplace is going to be quite slow. And then on the contract services side, this can be quite broad. Some of the things I notice are, say for example, in the world of distribution, you've got very entrenched local players. When it comes to CROs seeking to build out human resources, it's challenging to find sufficient staff. Moving on to some examples where, it's all very well to talk about this stuff in abstract, but I thought it might be helpful to share some examples where, I've seen, specific companies struggle, not necessarily ones that I've advised, just to be clear, but ones that I've seen, maybe find out things that they wish they had found out earlier on before they made big decisions. And this isn't meant to dissuade you from coming to Japan, more to alert you to some of the challenges. And I've kind of picked a few examples from different subsegments. So one recent one I've been looking at is biopharma. What we've seen here is a company's basically in the world of renal care has committed to developing a product for Japan, seeking a regulatory approval, then found out after the regulatory approval that it didn't see eye to eye with the Ministry of Health, Labour and Welfare on pricing, which is a bit of an unusual situation, but not a great situation, and now finds itself a bit in limbo as it struggles to work out, what is the path forward, which is probably disappointing given the investment that was made. On the regenerative medicine side, one example that I've seen is where, a company which had, I think, a pretty nice advanced vascular device, which was a cellularized vascular product, which, it had a pretty strong economic case behind it that it would save probably for every implantation, a large amount of money to the healthcare system. But unfortunately, the way Japanese pricing works is there isn't a direct way to really reflect kind of economic value creation in a price. And sometimes actually it can be quite disappointing, the price that you get. And in this case, the company didn't feel quite confident enough to embark on clinical trials in the first place. Healthcare IT, a company I have been observing is in the business of aggregating, de-identifying data from different sources and then making that available for analytics providers. And this is a fairly nascent area in Japan. There is frameworks in place to make this possible, but there's a requirement to be a certified agent to do this with data. And then there's the kind of, you make that investment, but you have to kind of assume if you build it, they will come for the demand side of things, because right now, in the absence of data, there's not so many companies or even, provider reasons to use that data, given the reimbursement system. There isn't that much in the way of demand. So that the company that I am observing is kind of thinking through, A, what is it required to become a certified agent, and B, is there going to be a demand at the end of the day to support that kind of market entry decision. A couple of other examples over here on the right-hand side, medical devices. This one on the top right, the example that I'm looking at is basically that the company that I was observing had a pretty well validated advanced device for a certain cardiovascular condition, had brought the product to market, but then was puzzled about, Japan should have a large number of patients, but we're only seeing 10% of these patients. Where the hell are they? When we actually worked with this company, when we did quite detailed research, we found that there was considerable leakage along the patient journey, kind of beginning in kind of cardiology kind of practices out in the community, all the way through to the actual kind of hospital where the implantation was due to take place, and those patients were just dropping off one after the other, so that by the time, for every 10 patients that dropped off, there would only be one patient making it all the way to implantation. So that was something they probably should have understood earlier. And then you can see some other examples down here on the right-hand side as well. So I'm just going to move on quickly because I wanted to say a few points on COVID-19. One is just, what has the impact of COVID-19 been in Japan's health ecosystem? This is by no means the Bible on this topic, but kind of reflects things that I have in my mind from looking at the system. But and these are obviously going to be quite similar across the world in terms of the challenges that COVID-19 is posing. But basically, Japan's healthcare system, you can kind of see the pressures here, is facing challenges along a few dimensions. One, funding. Basically, like all markets, there's been a big spike in kind of public debt, stimulus being provided to the economy. Some of that has benefited the healthcare system in that it's kind of gone immediately, or healthcare players to finance kind of PPE, ventilators, that type of things. But the kind of the longer term implication of that is increased public debt in a country which already has very high public debt and is basically already trying to manage down costly parts of its public spending, including healthcare. And basically COVID-19 just adds more acuity to the mix. On the regulatory and reimbursement side, I think, much like other countries, the realities of the virus have disrupted their typical processes. On the supply chain, we've seen dealers, a shutdown of procedures has put pressure on their inventory, on their finances. On the provider side, similarly, a near close down in procedures has put a lot of financial pressure on providers. And then on the patient side, you've got economic pressure, you've got avoidance or fear of high risk environments, and you've just got logistical challenges on getting about, which are making life difficult. So all of these things are playing out in Japan. And just in terms of the opportunities that these dimensions may present, again, not comprehensive, and I think I may be kind of slightly preempting the discussion to come. But I've laid out a few thoughts here, kind of more nearer term and longer term opportunities, shall we say. On the nearer term side of things, you can, much like other markets in the world, nearer term, I think there's obviously going to be, there is very much demand for PPE. You can imagine people, or hospitals, the country maintaining bigger stocks in the future. There's a push for telehealth. Some of the reimbursement and the regulatory considerations around that have been relaxed over the course of COVID-19, hopefully here to stay. Infection control, services to help hospitals improve their operations. And then the final one on the left-hand side, which we're seeing a lot of interest in, is digital sales, so helping companies selling products engage with customers, but in a way that minimizes the need for face-to-face interaction. Over the longer term, I think what we expect to see with COVID-19 is increased acuity around existing trends towards a need for improved efficiency in the healthcare system. So moving patients to less acute care settings has been, compounded by the need to keep patients away from high-risk locations. So that kind of, I think you'll see an increase in home health, desire to, move patients around the community, keep track of those patients as they move from setting to setting. And just more generally, products, this would assume kind of changes to the reimbursement system to a certain extent, but products and solutions that can, offer improvement in clinical and economic outcomes. Final slide, just in terms of a way of thinking about market entry, which I guess is on tops of mind for lots of folks on the phone. How we typically go about this is really a kind of a fairly systematic approach to thinking, first of all, at the top here, what does the opportunity look like? What are my options around entry? Do I set up my own operations here from end to end? Do I enter into partnerships? Do I fully out-license whatever I have? Kind of laying out those options and then characterizing them along a range of dimensions that would kind of inform your decision making, so that often financial, strategic considerations, but also very practical things around, do you have enough time to manage market entry into Japan if you're also managing market entry into the United States? Do you have sufficient funding? Are you familiar enough with Japan that you'd be willing to, this is going to take up a lot of your time. Do you feel comfortable doing so? And usually that kind of sends you in one or two directions. You can see at the bottom here. If it all looks good, pretty compelling, a lot of companies these days feel like, let's go ahead and try to do something direct. If the case seems challenging, and maybe you've got other things demanding your time, often in that kind of situation, people decide to fully partner their products and services. So that's the end of my presentation. So thank you for bearing with me, and I'll hand it back to Nicholas.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patrick, for your presentation. I think a lot of the topics that you discussed we'll be touching upon on the panel discussion as well, which I will be moving next. So welcome to the panel discussion. We have a couple of new faces here. Also, Inamura-san and Patrick will be joining us. So how this is going to work is that during the panel discussion from the audience, we'll be happy to take some questions as well. And before we start, I would of course like to ask our three new members to give short introductions to themselves and also the organizations that they are affiliated with. So, and feel free to share your screen if you have some material you would like to present. So why don't we start with Hanna Ekman, the CEO at 2N Health. Hanna, if you can please share your screen. Thank you.
Hello. I'm trying to share it now. Second. Okay, hopefully you can see that. So I'm Hanna Ekman. I'm representing 2N Health from Finland. Our ambition is to multiply capacity of and improve access to quality healthcare services. So our customers are typically hospitals and doctors to whom we provide healthcare platform for remote monitoring, diagnostics, rehabilitation and population screening purposes. To patients, this means better availability of healthcare services, even remotely, and support to live as independently as possible. We established last March a Japanese joint venture with our Japanese partner from Canada Group. Telehealth Japan KK is now localizing the telehealth services for Japanese market. And our joint service design project with local pilots shall be completed by the end of this year. And even though our Japanese company was just established, our telehealth platform and service is already mature and being in use since 2013. And statistics, of course, encourage us to continue as the benefits and results of telehealth are quite clear. On the COVID-19 pandemic, we have added a self-assessment protocol for individuals to use even before any healthcare contact with clinicians. So this is just an example how the platform can be used for multiple purposes. So thank you for having this kind of opportunity for us. And I'd like to I'm waiting to have this debate. Thanks.
Thank you, Hanna, so much. Next, I would like to ask Mr. Okada from Actually Drug Discovery Partners, if you can give a short introduction to yourself and the organization that you work for.
Yep. Hopefully, you can see my face on the screen.
Actually, we are not being able to do that at the moment.
Just let me share my slide deck with you. Hopefully you see now the slide deck.
Yes, we can see the slides. Unfortunately, we're not able to see your video, but hopefully we can get that working.
Okay. So good morning. Sviabitate pas yaete Kengo Okada. Sgadie Bayan postdoctor Vito Uppsala University is varied. So thank you to the organizer of Nordic Innovation House Tokyo for giving me this opportunity to join as a panelist. So I'm from Actually Drug Discovery Partners, a Japan-based service provider of drug discovery. So my career started as a postdoc researcher in Sweden and then spent in academia as an assistant professor in Japan before moving to the pharmaceutical industry. I used to work for Takeda Pharmaceutical in the research division and now heading business functions at Actually. So Actually is on-site at Shonan Health Innovation Park. So we call it Shonan I Park, and it is located at west of Yokohama in Japan, offering one of the largest research facilities in Japan. So as you see the image here, the research area are comprised of a total of 15 buildings that are 10 stories for each and connected each other as if we were in the big mall. So I've heard that about 70 tenants and more than 2,000 people have already desks and lab space to work in iPark. So Actually is the company spun of Takeda preclinical R&D capabilities and founded 3 years ago with 200 and more experienced scientists. So one point to make us unique is that we have access to 30 years of Takeda drug discovery data. This might be a topic to elaborate later. So here showing typical functions and stages of drug discovery, and Actually covers most of the capabilities as functions needed to deliver clinical candidates. So co-locating on-site at iPark enables a speedy exploration and exploration essential for successful drug discovery process as a platform. So since our business launched in 2017, Actually has been receiving great attention from various sectors, capturing the preclinical outsourcing in the wave of innovation happening to Japan. So we now have collectively a good number of customers and aspire to becoming the most sought after solution provider of drug discovery. So here just for you how many we are, just 250 or more in total and 200 plus researchers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Okada-san. And next, I would like to ask Ms. Minya Salmio from Nightingale Health, if you can give a brief introduction to yourself and Nightingale Health. Thank you.
Hello, Niklas and others. Can you hear and see me?
All good?
Yes, great. So my name is Minya Salmio. I'm VP of Nightingale Japan business. Nightingale is a global company with headquarters in Finland, Helsinki, but we have a strong strategic focus in the Japanese market. So I'm very excited to to be part of this community as well, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in this webinar and panel. I thought I could start the introduction of Nightingale by showing a short video. So I will share my screen. Yes. Can you see my screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
Become the benefit of everyone. Us, together, 8 billion strong, making life as big as it deserves to be.
So I'm not sure if you were able to hear the sound. I heard from my colleague that there might be some problem with the sound of the video.
Hello, Minya. We're currently looking at your screen. Is this okay?
Okay.
Through your video, we can see your face at the moment.
Okay, just 1 minute.
No problem.
Yes, sorry for this. So now, now can you hear and see?
Yes, that should be fine.
Yes, great.
Millions of people are killed by chronic diseases every year, and millions more suffer. Death and suffering that really isn't necessary, but in fact, highly preventable. We know it. The World Health Organization knows it. And those who profit from keeping things the way they are also know it. The profit of the few versus the health of the many. Money before people. We don't agree with that. It's old world thinking. With new technologies, change is coming. A new kind of health creation system that goes beyond treatment and starts predicting, preventing, and avoiding. A new kind of health creation system with people, for people, giving scientists the ability to build on each other's findings, giving people the power to understand their lifestyle choices, predict, and steer out of harm's way, giving governments the tools to keep their citizens healthy. A new kind of health creation system where the learnings of one become the benefit of everyone. Us, together, 8 billion strong, making life as big as it deserves to be.
Yes. Thank you for watching the video. I will just briefly add some things about why Nightingale exists to give a brief introduction.
Hey, Nini, I think we need to start moving forward with the panel, but if you can just briefly let us know about the service that Nightingale is providing, and I'm sure during the panel we'll have a chance to learn more.
Yes, so our mission is to solve the world's biggest health problem. So we're focusing on chronic diseases, namely type 2 diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. And this problem is an increasingly large problem. But the good thing is that this is a problem that can be solved. So the World Health Organization says that 80% of the chronic diseases can be prevented. And this is where Nightingale enters into the picture. So we have developed a blood test that can predict your health. I can tell more about it in the panel.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Minja, and thank you for all the panelists for being here today. So let's get started. And I would like to first address perhaps the elephant in the room, COVID-19. I'm interested in hearing how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected your industry and your business. And I would like to hear especially from Hanna, Okada-san, and Minja from your experiences.
Yes.
If you, Hanna, would like to go first, how has the COVID-19 situation affected your industry?
Thank you, Niklas. The COVID-19 had a good and bad sides. So, well, you may not say that it has any good sides, but if you just think about the development of our platform and the service offering, that it forced us to move on. We added this kind of self-assessment protocol to the platform. We tried to figure out how this platform could be used also for other kind of pandemics or other kind of epidemics even. And that gave us some sort of idea and good start. But how it affected us and our business in Japan, as we are still in a startup phase in Japan, of course, it prevented us to go through the pilots that we thought we would be able to start already in the beginning of the year. And as the culture in Japan is more or less around face-to-face meetings, it was really hard for us to meet our contacts, meet our stockholders, possible clients, and then we figure out this kind of system where we have now support from especially from Royal Danish Embassy, that they are helping us to keep the contact, even though during these days and then Peter Takechama has been a wonderful support for us in that sense. But otherwise, I think that this kind of pandemic teached us to develop, not to stay where we are, but really focus on development also of these kind of general platforms that we have.
Thank you, Hanna. Would you, for example, Okada-san, would you like to add something from the drug discovery industry? How has the COVID-19 affected your company and your organization?
Yeah, can you see my face this time?
Yes.
So from the pharma industry perspective, I think it's obvious that the pursuit of possibility for the creation of vaccine and the therapeutic agent has become a top priority issue. And it is becoming a major movement in Japan, of course, as well as the world. And some would explore the expanded application of existing drugs. And some others would explore new possibilities by utilizing new technologies. But speed is important in both cases. And I think that only a small number of the world's major pharma companies can work individually. But biotech companies with unique technologies are also aiming for some clinical trials. And for us, Axrid has actually more than 10 inquiries from such companies and startups, not only in Japan, but from the US or some others. And that fact makes us feel very encouraged, I think, with a sense of responsibilities. We are currently discussing how to proceed, in a timely manner. And on the other hand, addressing COVID-19 is not the whole mission of the pharmaceutical industry. I think in such an unprecedented situation, I think that there are more and more cases where the ongoing clinical trial programs are interrupted or clinical trial enrollment is hampered due to social distancing. And getting back to preclinical drug discovery research, where actually is strictly involved, likewise, the researchers are not allowed to come to research facilities in general. But it's fortunate that Sean iPark did not shut down the whole operation at all, and actually shifted the remote work model only for a month. And now getting back to almost normal operation with without work. So that's the current situation and directly affecting to our industry, especially in the service as a service provider, not from the pharma viewpoint. Yep.
Thank you, Okada-san. Minya, would you like to tell a little bit about Nightingale Health and how has COVID-19 affected your operations?
Yes, thank you. So, as I said, Nightingale is focusing on prevention of chronic diseases, and has already before COVID been a strong pressure for the healthcare system to be shifting towards this prevention. But now, after the COVID-19 breakout, we have seen the pressure coming bigger and bigger. So this has accelerated the demand after actionable tools to stay healthy. So we think that in the COVID crisis, there are two different types of solutions, and both are important. So it's treating the people who have got sick, but then there's the prevention. So we need both, and Nightingale is focusing on this prevention part, and we have in our test, we have these 250 blood biomarkers that tell about your health. And there's also a potential for infectious diseases. So I think that this is kind of something that we have been seeing in our business, a strong demand after prevention and bringing also tools for protecting those who are in a risk of getting a severe form of COVID, and for that we need a broad amount of biological data. That's from the business perspective. From operational perspective, in Japan, we have been able to continue the work. So we are in a state of preparing for the market entry, and we are our aim is to bring our service to the market early next year, and that's still ongoing in schedule.
Okay, that's really interesting. We'll get to that in a little bit later. Thank you, Minya. I would also be curious to ask from Inamura-san from METI, how have you seen the COVID-19 pandemic affecting the Japanese healthcare industry in general? I think you touched about it a little bit on your keynote, but if you want to elaborate a little bit.
Yes, as you know, the countermeasure mainly countermeasures on COVID-19 in healthcare system as a whole is mainly done by Ministry of Health, MHLW, but we support the health ministry in how to say reconstructing the supply chain for personal protective equipment such as masks or face shield, and also for the supply chain of medicine, because we're in charge of manufacturing industry, and so at a certain point we realized how much we are dependent on the imported parts and materials, and so we made some decision to provide some new subsidies for the company, which decided to make new investment for PPEs or medicine, and the METI took part on supporting this kind of subsidy for the company who decided to make new investment for the building up capacity for providing this kind of PPE or medicine. So in general, the Japanese government worked very closely to cope with this situation, and so and there are a lot of new issues. Even after the say we can purchase masks and even in convenience stores, but once we started this kind of how I say a new system, we have to keep supporting this flow of these PPEs. So we keep watch on the situation, and we might need some new policy when the how to say the research of the COVID-19 come maybe later this year. That's it.
Thank you, Inamura-san. Okay, now that we've addressed the elephant in the room, let's move on and talk a little bit more about health tech in Japan. And I would also like to be touching about the opportunities and some of the challenges. So I'm sure we'll get a lot of insights from Patrick's keynote as well. But let's start with the opportunities first. So what are some of the health tech business opportunities that you see in Japan, and why is that? And here again, maybe if we start, we can start with Hanna, for example. If you can share us a little bit from To and Health's perspective, what are some of the opportunities that you have identified here? Why, and why is that?
No, well, I guess that there are a lot of opportunities as Japan is only slowly stepping into this kind of remote healthcare that we are representing. So the platform that we are offering to the market is mainly used for remote monitoring and diagnostics, but we have also used that for rehabilitation purposes. And as that's not yet really generally used in Japan, and I'm talking about at general level, not just our product, then there is a great opportunity, and we are excited because we can not only bring like a platform, but we can also bring experiences from different countries, because this platform has been used in Nordic countries, but also in Canada and elsewhere. So we have like a wide experience of all different kind of possibilities that you can apply this kind of platform for, and that's really good opportunity. But at the same time, we have these kind of obstacles to go over, and most of them are related to the local regulation, as it still support a little bit better the traditional way to treat, and especially the national insurance system is we have identified that it's only slowly adapting changes so that these kind of remote tools would be beneficial also for the doctor's point of view.
Thank you, Hanna. Next, I would like to address the same question to Okada-san as a local Japanese company. What are some of the opportunities that you've located, perhaps within the drug discovery field or some other health tech industry?
Yeah, from the perspective of time axis in our drug discovery areas, again, in the short term, as Patrick also mentioned earlier, I think the funding from public and private sources rapidly increase because of urgency and importance to treat with therapy. And in this regard, Axrid is getting many inquiries for support in drug discovery, which is probably because we have plenty of pharma experience in the early to late stages of drug discovery process to deliver clinical candidates. So this is tangible, easy to understand business opportunity for us. And I would say not many service provider or a typical conventional CRO in this area could be, in this area could be eligible for becoming a counterparty. So I think the Axrid would be way ahead in Japan in terms of both capabilities and capacities to pursue, and located it on-site in this shown iPark. And thinking about mid to long term, outsourcing trend of discovery research steadily accelerated in Japan and Asia. So why I can say this is because we have already observed sure solid trend with US and Europe area as a role models over the last decades. And overall, the pharma R&D research and development styles and manner of fashion in Japan gets more dynamic and entering an emerging phase in terms of outsourcing with shared platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Okada-san. Let me also extend the same question to Minya from Nightingale Health. What are some of the business opportunities that you have identified here in Japan and decided to take the step to be involved in the Japanese market?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we also see many opportunities and have a long-term plan in Japan. As we heard in the first presentation, Japan has fast aging population and rising problem with the healthcare costs. But also there are these existing systems for prevention, such as the medical checkups and the Ningen system. So that's one area where we are interested and see our test being a good fit. So we also operate a bit in a similar way that Hanna mentioned about this kind of having operations in the Nordic. So for us, Finland is a reference market. So we have had our consumer product in the market in Finland since January, and that is something that we are looking into also localizing for Japan. So that's a mobile application called My Nightingale, where you can have insightful information about your overall health. And one other area very interesting is the health management of employers. So there, I think Nightingale has great opportunities bringing affordable tests. So not only checking annually, but checking frequently with affordable follow-up tests during the year, seeing where your health is going, and from the employer's perspective, keeping employees healthy, fulfilling obligations. So for this, I see Japan being a very good fit for Nightingale.
Thank you, Minya. Some similar experiences with Hanna, I see, and having a reference market that you can then use in negotiations here seems to be a common strategy there. Perhaps I would also like to extend this question to Inamura-san from a more broader perspective, from your experience, and what do you see are some of the health technology, healthcare business opportunities here in Japan?
Well, I'm not an expert on this specific field of healthcare technology, but I think I can fairly say that the demand is growing for new technology. As some of you pointed out, this our national healthcare system is reaching a point to which everyone thinks is difficult to sustain, and then so we need some kind of new technology to provide better healthcare service with more efficient way. So I think demand is high, and one example is that the government made decision on deregulation on the remote diagnosis last month, which is under the influence of COVID-19. So I think there's some consensus among the government offshore, among the government, that we have to make better use of health data and to expedite the process for sanctioning new medical devices or medicine. So I can fairly say that now is a better timing for thinking about promoting the innovation in Japanese healthcare industry. But as many of you mentioned, that still we have a lot of challenges, and we have to tackle this. And so this is my rough sketch of this situation. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Inamura-san. Patrick, did we forget anything in your presentation? You very nicely brought some of the opportunities, but do you think there is still something that we should touch upon here in this panel as well?
No, I think all good points. I would just add that I mean, it's taken a long time for telemedicine to take off in Japan. There's been kind of discussion about that for 15, 20 years, and China, for example, has long eclipsed Japan. I'm going to start my video for you. But it seems that with COVID-19, the environment for telemedicine has become more permissive. Physicians are able to practice more through telemedicine and receive reimbursement. Hopefully that doesn't go away, once the world decides that COVID-19 is under control, but that becomes more an established part of how medicine is practiced. And it would make a lot of sense given that there is a large elderly population who are not so mobile. Maybe there might be a kind of a digital literacy issue there a bit, but living in remote places, it's not always convenient, or it's rarely convenient to expect elderly folks to regularly come to the clinic, come to the doctor when a consultation could more conveniently happen over just a telephone or a smartphone. So that would be another area that in the nearer term, the signals seem to be pointing in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. So now that we've talked about all the opportunities, and we've talked about quite a bit of challenges also today, so maybe we'll just have a quick round of that, and also based on your personal experiences here in Japan. What would you say are perhaps a few of the key challenges that you have faced in your operations here? And was there anything surprising, or if there is someone currently thinking about health tech entry, what would be your advice in terms of, like, these are maybe some of the things that you might want to take into account? And it would be interesting to hear, for example, from Minya from Nightingale Health. What have been in your Japan market entry journey some of the key difficulties that you faced so far, and perhaps how have you tackled them?
Yeah, so I do agree with some of the challenges that have been mentioned earlier today. So you should indeed prepare with enough time and resources for the market entry. language is a big factor. So prepare to have a Japanese language skilled persons in your team. That's definitely needed. But overall, I see Japanese culture being a very good fit with Finnish culture. So we're both hardworking, honest people, and the collaboration is very smooth and very it is very nice to work with in the Japanese market. So but these are some of the challenges, and as said, we are bringing the service to the market next year. Now we are in the process of establishing a Nightingale laboratory in Japan. That requires some regulation, but I feel that the Japanese authorities have been very well receiving this new type of technology, which is our technology is based on this Inamura, which is quite new. So in the field of blood analysis for healthcare use, so it's been very well received. So overall, it's been going very well. But yeah, recruitment is of course one topic where we have had a bit struggle, but I need to still work with that area.
Okay, thank you, Minja. How about Hanna from 2.5?
Yeah, and I'd like to point out one thing that Mr. Inamura and Pran just told us, that it's not only a need because of the aging population and so cost efficiency, but also the people in Japan, they may want to have this kind of remote possibilities. So it's not just a need like that comes from the hospitals or government, but we have also noticed that there is desire to use and step into use these kind of remote healthcare services. And that's a good thing, because without that kind of support, without that kind of commitment from the patient's sides, we cannot succeed naturally. But when it comes to the obstacle that we have faced, Minja just greatly said those, and I can also underline the same. But what is really good thing is that between Nordic countries and Japan, there is similarities also in the culture, and we have felt that we can really trust to those persons that we are discussing with there. And at the same time, we have noticed that without a local strong partner, you cannot really take a leap. So you need to have a local partner in order to understand the local needs, because they may not be the similar that we have in all details. So we faced that we needed to localize the service. We needed to think about how to bring it to the market, because there is the attitude towards these kind of systems may not be exactly the same. So you need to think about how to bring it quite carefully. And then also because of this national insurance systems, we also faced that we needed to think about the business model for the hospitals, because the first question that I faced like 2 years ago at one seminar was that one doctor asked that, "That's great, you are taking the patients out of the hospital, but what is good for me then if I'm not anymore having the patients?" So we faced that at the same time when the doctors really want to have better availability with the healthcare services, and they really want to give a good treatment, but at the same time, of course, they need to think about also their business models. And that was one thing that we noticed that we need to develop further with them to understand how this works. But of course, this kind of remote systems, you can have even more patients because of you can give this kind of service despite of distance. You can also get foreign patients, and especially Minja Minia also told about this occupational healthcare is really good for the big corporations, because then they can have this kind of service even though personnel is traveling, for example. So we feel that there are more opportunities than obstacles, but still you need to be really patient.
Okay. Thank you, Hanna. Very interesting what you mentioned also about the business modeling perspective and really explaining the value to all the stakeholders involved, not just the end user per se. Perfect. How about Okada-san, Axel-lead here, local company here in Japan? What are perhaps some of the difficulties that you felt in the drug discovery field, and perhaps compared to some of the other countries that you might be involved in or looking into?
Yeah, as we are working in the early stage, as I think not in the preclinical or the healthcare in the market, but just at more the academic area or the early stage pre or early seed or just around A or B. And I think from the infrastructure viewpoint in Japan, as far as we discussed the scientific direction, everything that should be on the same page compared to the other whole countries. But in the business side, I think we need further strengthen interactions among players from various sectors, which is, I believe, prerequisite for innovation. And this has been demonstrated as so-called hotspot in the US or Europe. And presumably one of the major factors for success is how we can be in a community where people are openly networking, discussing, inspiring through daily activities at their workplace. And I think in this regard, Japan might have some really small chords sporadically existing everywhere. And if we count up the number of such some small spots, so-called, we can say almost maybe double, triple year by year. But still, reality is not like that straightforward as viewpoint, from my viewpoint. And I have felt that the Shonan iPark, where I'm coming to work, should become one of such a hotspot in Japan. So of course, I'm not a rep of iPark and not going to go in detail anything about it this time, but I'd like to encourage everyone joining here to visit a web page of Shonan iPark and eventually come see us in the future in person. No one could imagine this situation just a couple years ago, the days when Takeda had a research site, just a big buildings, but now more than 70 companies, not only the startup of the healthcare, but med device farm, an asset-based pipeline company, or even IBM, Yokogawa Electric, and legal firm, everyone from the various sector joining and moving into the Shonan iPark makes us feel really just a small town or cities every day in the work situation. That's a kind of needed situation to ramp up and also moving toward the new era in Japan. Thank you.
Thank you, Okada-san. We can include some information to our participants after the event about this initiative. Interesting that you mentioned more this like a community and open culture. Besides that, we've touched upon localization, language, having a local partner, business modeling. Again, Patrick, are we missing something? What would you say are from your presentation, some of the things that maybe resonated in this discussion as well?
So I would echo Hannah's point around business models. And I think I mentioned a data company we'd been helping a bit look at Japan. And I mean, their first instinct was to try to understand where is the data, can we get it in one place, and from a regulatory perspective, can we be allowed to manage and de-identify and then package that up for analytics companies to use to sell on to providers or whoever. And I mean, there's answers to those questions and there's a path forward, but when it comes down to it, there's a question about demand for data analytics in a healthcare system where reimbursement is based upon paying providers to do more rather than paying providers to manage the economic costs and also clinical outcomes. And it's a little bit tough to imagine you know, some of the things that you might see in Europe and US really taking off rather until some of the incentives change in Japan, so that, you know, hospitals have a little bit more skin in the game around economic outcomes, clinical outcomes, and then they'll see the benefit of more data and analytics and healthcare IT to help them manage the populations that come to see them. So that's kind of like a big challenge that, you know, I hope Japan moves in the right direction, because I see it's critical for getting costs under control, as well as enabling all this other good stuff that we're talking about. But these things take time, especially in Japan.
Thank you, Patrick, so much. Next, I would like to move on to hear a little bit about the market entry journey from two of our companies that have entered into the Japanese market, Student Health and Nightingale Health. If you can just briefly elaborate us a little bit about the journey that you've gone through, some of the key milestones you can touch upon, for example, how long did the process take? What kind of company form did you choose? You're all here with a partner. How did that take place? Where did you, for example, find this partner, and how did that relationship build? Or what are some of the key milestones or the key decisions in your Japan market entry that you would like to share with your audience, with our audience today? And if we can, actually, I would like to also combine this question with one question from the audience, which is, what is the best way for Japanese partners to help EU startups enter or succeed in Japan? So related to partners again. So if you can tell a little bit about your market entry, how it has gone, and what has been the role of a local Japanese partner, and maybe some best practices there. If we can start with Hanna, for example.
Okay, so I can say that we were sort of lucky, because Mr. Toshidara Kameda came to Denmark 2017 and found our partner from there. And since that, we started to travel to Japan and plan this kind of telehealth service to be offered for Japanese market together with Kameda. And but it took like 2.5 years to establish a local company joint venture, because we needed to do a careful market study. We needed to understand all these systems, because they are so different compared to the Nordic countries. Of course, they are always different wherever you are going, but it was even more a little bit different than we are used to. And then also there were some uncertainties, like as our software is a medical device in EU, so we couldn't get clear answer first that how they will consider this platform in Japan. Shall we need some sort of certification? And so we started to discuss with Kamena Healthcare Informatics first, that whether we could have any possibilities there. But at the same time, besides of this, we hired this kind of consultancy company to make a market study, and we visited like every quarter. We visited a seminar, a discussion, really active, like touching the local atmosphere as well as the environment, and how they would feel about this kind of service. And then we were able to also attend to a spring conference of Japanese Telehealth and Telemedicine Association, and we met great doctors there, and it's really good to hear also what kind of debates they had around this subject. They have many sorts of questions about cloud service. Is it safe? Is it secure, data secure? How we handle the data, as Patrick just mentioned. Who will own this data? For what purposes you are using it? And well, that was easy question to ask, because we are not really at this phase. We are not really. Our main focus is not the data to bring it to ourselves, but to purposes of our clients. So, but there are like many doubts also related to this kind of online treatment and the telemedicine. So I guess we are still in that phase that we need to have this kind of discussions with all stakeholders like authorities, associations, also doctors, hospitals, public and private ones, because they also have a different kind of opinions. And also the universities are having a big role in Japan, I guess even bigger than, for example, in Finland. So the universities are strongly connected to the hospitals, at least those that we have visited.
Thank you, Hanna, so much. It's a lot of great insights there. I hope that our audience is taking notes. If I can also extend the same question to Minja, if you want to share a little bit about the journey that Nightingale Health has gone through in your Japan entry, and also combined with the audience question, how has the role of a Japanese partner been to you?
Yeah, so in a way, the Japan journey has been visible, or starts from the journey of Nightingale, which was 2013. So already from the early days, Japan has been on the map because of the characteristics of its healthcare system. But however, the first 5 years or so, we have been focusing on before the global expansion to make the technology scalable. We've been selling to research customers, so academic institutions such as the University of Oxford have used our technology, and there's more than 230 scientific publications on our technology, and showing how our biomarkers have value in showing the status of your health and following up it. And I'm mentioning this because this all is very important for the Japan market entry. So having a very solid scientific evidence and background. So that's one thing, and then the other one is the regulatory approvals we have in EU. So we also have a CE mark according to the IVD device and accreditation of our laboratory, and all this gives us a huge advantage when entering the Japanese market. So having the groundwork done and very good basis for expansion. We've been present in Japan from beginning of last year. We have an employee present there. There's been a lot of interest towards Nightingale in Asia, so we have had a broad network in Asia, and also we were lucky to be introduced to Mitsui and Kirin, who are our strategic partners, and this partnership was published in November last year, and since then we've been working with the business collaboration and bringing the service to the Japanese market. We were about to send a larger team to Japan just days before the lockdown, so hoping to get started with that, having more people in Japan in August.
Thank you, Minja, for sharing very exciting times. Looking forward to seeing how the Nightingale Health journey continues here in Japan. Thank you. Before we move on to our closing rounds, I would just like to have a quick round. If everyone can share perhaps 2 pieces of advice that you would give for companies who are considering a market entry for Japan in this health tech or healthcare innovation space. And why don't we start with Patrick? 2 main pieces of advice from today.
Very quickly, I would say do your homework, collect the information, do your research, and make thoughtful decisions. Don't assume that Japan is much the same as France or Canada or or Sweden or the United Kingdom, because you'll probably come unstuck on one point which you got completely wrong. Second, kind of going back to this business model incentives point, really understand the customer and what makes them tick, and make sure that you have a valid value proposition in the Japanese context. We often see confusion around that point, so that's another thing that you really need to get right.
Thank you, Patrick. Inamura-san from METI, would you have some pieces of advice for foreign companies who might be interested in entering the Japan health tech market, or some other general advice in the market?
Okay, I'm not sure I'm in good position to provide that advice at this stage, but I think in general our system, bureaucratic system and the regulation is very open and fair to all companies, and regardless of domestic or foreign companies. At the same time, some kind of regulation in your views is not rational or efficient. This is not just because you're a foreign company. It's the same regulation applied to all the Japanese company too, and we have to keep improving this system. And as you correctly mentioned, that we have to change some of the regulations. So in that view, I think it's quite helpful that you have talked with some local partner and discuss with them the rationale for these kind of regulation, and knowing the big difference between the situation in Japan and the other country, and that might help you to understand the situation and how the system might evolve, and can see what kind of reform will going through in Japan. That's my advice.
Thank you, Inamura-san. Perhaps Hanna, from your journey, what would be 2 pieces of advice that you would give to companies who are also considering embarking or already involved?
To add to what already has been said, I would say that you need to be patient, and also you need to have a great passion what you are doing, because it may take a little bit longer than you thought. So, but also it's good to check your opportunities within these startup events, which, for example, the local PANGs are arranging. We have had good events at Sumitomo's startup program. So these kind of PANGs are having really interesting programs, and they may introduce you to different kind of investors from different fields of for example, manufacturing or elsewhere. So also they have a strong presence at the healthcare. So maybe that's a good point to check if you are interested or need some funding or would like to attend these kind of events.
Thank you. That's actually a really interesting point. Hasn't come up today earlier, so thank you for bringing that up. What about Minia, from your journey? Perhaps 2 pieces of advice that you would like to share.
Yeah, I fully agree with what was said previously. I think the most important advice is focusing on the good partnership and building strong relationships. But also like to mention to be brave and innovative. That's the only way to get new services to the market, and there's definitely room for that also in Japan.
Thank you for sharing. We are unfortunately running out of time. Okada-san, is there something you would still like to share to our audience today? Advice of entering into Japan, or some other key message that you would like to deliver to our audience from today?
Yes, just a quick comment. I believe, again, I'm repeating the same word, creating and developing the community with someone external is a key, and I'm thrilled to be joining this exciting Society of Nordic Innovation House. It happening to farmer industries where need to accelerate business transformation with consideration of beyond pure and of innovation, which are always science and technology driven. So again, I'm very much looking forward to continued mutual communication followed by a partnership and R&D. So thanks again for planning this session and inviting me this time.
Thank you so much, Okada-san. And it's 7 o'clock here in Japan, which means that time has run out for us. My apologies for some of the questions that we didn't have time to answer. This was a very fascinating 2 hours, a lot of content. I'm really happy that we have a recording of this, which we will be sharing afterwards, along with some other additional information and a feedback form. I would like to give a warm thank you to all of our panelists here today. Thank you so much for being with us, sharing your expertise, your ideas and advice. I'm sure that's been very useful for our participants. And I look forward to having another opportunity to collaborate with you again. So thank you so much. And thank you to also all of our participants who joined us today. And the last thing that I would just like to show you is a contact slide. You see our Nordic Innovation House contacts here. Feel free to reach out if you are a Nordic company interested in market entry here in Japan within the technology and innovation field. Or if you're a Japanese ecosystem player interested in the Nordics, please feel free to reach out. The other contacts that you see here are the Nordic Health Tech and Life Science Support Services here in Japan. So if you're a company from these countries, you can also directly reach out to your representatives within this field, and they can take the discussions forward. I will leave this slide open for a couple of more minutes, but with this, I would like to conclude our event for today. Once again, thank you to all of our panelists for being here today. I really appreciate the time and the effort that you have put into this. So thank you all so much, and have a lovely continuation to your day. ありがとうございました。
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Okada-san. Thank you, Nomura-san.